Kenyon Williams, Professor of Percussion at Minnesota State University Moorhead. Today I'd like to discuss with you 3 tips to help you do your very best at the North Dakota Mallet Audition for 2026. Let's start off by pointing out some of the obvious things to be aware of. Number 1, make sure that you can play all the notes correctly. The only way that you can play notes correctly is to do what? That's right, start slow, take your time. Make sure that you're paying close attention to the accidentals. There's quite a few in this etude, and especially the key. This etude is in the key of D major, although when you look at the top, the scale, the key signature at the beginning seems to be just G major, but it's actually in D major. So it's important that you practice a D major scale. So I'm going to practice. My students do their scales in 2 octaves, so that way they learn it ambidextrously. Left hand on D at the beginning, and for the 2nd octave, now my right hand's learning it, etc. And don't forget to practice the arpeggio as well. Again, 2 octaves. Like that. Now, the thing that you want to be aware of too is in terms of the notes, taking it slow, making sure the rhythms are correct, and of course, always get to know your friend, the metronome. No matter what you do, the metronome is the single most important tool a percussionist owns beyond their brain and their sticks. So, at the beginning, am I picking this? I don't want to start practicing at this tempo. That's 112. I want to start rather at a nice slow tempo where I feel like I almost can't miss notes. So at this tempo, and notice I'm going to be using the stickings that are written in for me. They're very useful. And I'm also going to look for my own stickings that are going to help me. And that brings us to practice tip number 2. Make sure that you really completely have solid stickings after your first practice session. I have all my students take a pencil and write in any stickings that are at all questionable. Now, the basic rule of thumb for all mallet playing is you want to use no more than 2 strokes in one hand in a row. So in that, for example, the beginning then, this is acceptable. Sorry, the beginning. That double right is perfectly acceptable. But if a student did this, no way. 3 in a row, never okay. So 2 in a row, okay. Ideally though, alternating sticking as much as possible, except when you must, for example, the beginning of the etude. In that case, okay to use 2 in a row. The trickiest sticking spot in this entire etude is in the 2nd line in the 4th measure. Leading the 4th and 5th measure, we have this little passage that does this. Well, notice the way I use it for a sticking there. I did right, left, right, right, left, right, right, left, right, right. If you try to alternate that, that's very challenging. There's a good chance you're going to miss a note. I find it much easier to do again that with that right, right. And notice the pattern. That is simply a G arpeggio. So if I'm comfortable with my arpeggios and scales, that etude portion is very easy and quick to learn, which is why it's important to practice your scales and arpeggios all the time.
At MSU Moorhead, Dragons do.
We do more on campus. We do more in our classes.
We do more for our community.
Go Dragons!
Dragons do more. What will you do?
The 3rd and final tip I want to give you is make sure that you properly select mallets that reflect the sound you want. If you're auditioning on a marimba, and notice you can audition on a xylophone if necessary, but a marimba is definitely the best sound. If you're going to use a marimba, make sure you use the proper mallets. I've oftentimes heard students in auditions come with simply too hard of a mallet. Maybe they're using an all rubber mallet on a marimba, which is pretty unusual, or they're using, in this case, I'm using innovative percussion mallets, and these are 400s. Listen to the beginning with these mallets. Sounds like a xylophone. I've lost all the richness and the color of the marimba. Now, if I then go to a mallet that's maybe a little too soft, which is at the other end of the scale, and these are innovative percussion 200s, listen to this. I've lost all my definition. So trying to find something in the middle. For me personally, I would choose to use for this etude either innovative percussion 240s or 300s. 240s are a little bit softer, the 300s are a little bit harder, and honestly, it would kind of depend on the room I was doing the audition in. If I was playing in a room with lots of resonance, like this recital hall here at Minnesota State, I would use something with a little harder. If I was doing something that was very, in a room that's very dry, maybe I would use something that's a little bit softer so that I can make it balance out the dryness of the room. Now, that said, if I choose the proper mallets, it then makes it possible for me to play some very beautiful playing. Now, I want to point out too, if I play this piece with just the flat dynamics at the beginning and I don't use the colors in terms of my own dynamic shading, then this is going to be a very boring, uninteresting piece. For example, when I start at measure 8, notice this would be the way that many students will play it, which is not very great. Now, much more interesting is if I simply let myself add some crescendos and decrescendos. I teach my students what's called the dynamic scale, which is the basic idea that as I go up, our ear naturally wants to hear us crescendo. As we go down, we naturally want to hear things get a little softer. So when I have a chance to insert an inflection like that, for example in measure 8, instead of playing it flat, I would add instead a little inflection. And then here, I'm going now down a little softer because I went lower and then crescendo. And then jump back softer, crescendo again. If I put that all together, notice the difference. So here is the way that I would prefer to hear it myself, and much more musically sounding, much more musical in how it sounds. And then big dynamic drop, then real soft. Don't forget the retardando. And lift smooth and straight off. So, good luck with this year's North Dakota Mallet auditions, and I hope to see you at Allstate.